Welcome back. Carmichael Dave, Jason Ross, Matthew Barrows of The Athletic, and unfortunately, another week and another not win to talk about with our dear friend Matt, the oldest tenured, not in age, but longest tenured, I should say, guest of the program. Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, recovering from another traumatic ending there.
Yeah, and let me start. Look, Matt, as you know, I'm a diehard, emotional, dramatic Niner fan, and sometimes I get a little fanatic-y. But let me go back to was it Kyle Williams, which is a name that rings it. Like, I'm the guy that feels bad. I legitimately, and I was saying to Jason earlier, it's not like Ronnie Bell was like, I'm gonna drop a bunch of passes, and I'm gonna be a huge reason we lost the game. He works hard. He's tried to do this his whole life. He's trying to make it in the NFL. Like, it really is kind of sad when you think about it. And then also I'm sure he's gotten a few social media messages that you don't want to read to your mom. So with that all being said, though, is this just that game? Do you sense a concern there? What the heck?
I don't know. That was a problem in the preseason as well with Ronnie Bell. Some drops in those games, and no one made a big deal of it then, but it made him sort of tenuous as far as making the team. And frankly, I don't think he makes the team if Brandon Aiyuk is in camp and looks like Brandon Aiyuk. They kept an extra wide receiver. That extra wide receiver was Ronnie Bell, because Aiyuk missed all of camp, and they knew that it would take a little while for him to get up to speed early on. So, I mean, you could draw a line to Brandon Aiyuk's holdout to why Ronnie Bell made the squad. Now, Ronnie Bell was playing in this game, played a lot of snaps in this game. Other receivers did not get as many snaps. Jacob Cowing still hasn't gotten any offensive snaps, I don't think, which I think is interesting. I would think that Cowing would give you some options there. I mean, he's naturally Deebo Samuel's understudy. He does a lot of the same things that Ray McLeod did for this team in previous years, but with more speed. And he's more of a threat on the perimeter. He can stretch the field horizontally. Lots of reasons to get him in the game. For some reason, the 49ers just haven't used him yet. They preferred to use Ronnie Bell, and that was the result that they got yesterday.
Matt Barrows joining us from The Athletic, and he's joining us from Stockton Honda. Matt, the number of times the 49ers have lost a game that I would call that was kind of under their terms, it's very small. I mean, to be up 14 twice, to be running the ball effectively. Purdy had a good game. Jennings was magical. They didn't have a ton of turnovers, and the Rams are not an explosive team, especially without their weapons. Honestly, I think the loss is stunning. I can't believe they lost a game when most of the things were going their way. Special teams maybe got it triggered and certainly didn't have a huge impact in the end, but how surprising just in the element of the way the game was played that they end up with a loss.
Yeah, I mean, it is surprising. When you allow a team to hang around, and it's the home team, and that home team has a good quarterback, that can happen. And I think Shanahan sort of kind of felt it happening throughout. It was one of those where you see the tragedy falling all around you, and you just can't do anything about it. But I think you're right about the special teams. I mean, if you're going to point to one thing, it's the fake punt that sort of, gave the Rams life early on when that life was just getting snuffed out early on. And then the punt return, 37-yard punt return, that's just, to me, is unexcusable. It was a good punt. It lands at the 13 outside the hashes. I mean, you want to put somebody, I mean, I guess it could have been further into the corner, but that's about where you want that punt to land. And the 49ers allowed the returner to get outside of them and down the sideline. That's a cardinal sin of a punt coverage unit. And at that moment, the Rams needed a big punt return, and they got it. And then they got a pass interference call on the very next play. That I thought that was another theme obviously much more subtle theme, but the 49ers had one really great linebacker in that game, Fred Warner. And then there's a real fall off after Warner. And the Rams were taking advantage of that throughout. And I think that's sort of a question mark going forward. It raises the question, okay, when is Dre Greenlaw going to be back from his Achilles? And I think the answer to that is somewhere around mid-season. But boy, I don't think he can get back fast enough because they need his speed. They need his fire, his intensity, the way he covers people. They just don't have that element right now.
Matt, I love asking you unanswerable questions. But again,
go for it, Dave, please.
I look at these two losses and I go, okay, maybe I'm trying to cope here with the amount of injured they have out, both offensively, and we haven't gotten to the defense really that much yet. Last year, they had injuries. They lost those 3 in a row to Cleveland, Minnesota again, and Cincinnati, but they finished 12-5 and Super Bowl. Year before, they start 3-4. They finish 13-4, and the Purdy injury, Philadelphia. The year before that, they lose 4 in a row at the beginning of the year. They're 2-5 at one point. They finish 10-7. They make it to the conference final, lose against the Rams. So this team seems to have a habit of suffering injuries or God knows what. They have this weird stretch and then they figure it out and they end the season on a high note. Am I wrong as a Niner fan to try to cope with that and say, okay, well, maybe we're just getting the injuries and these stupid losses out of the way early for once?
Yeah, you're right. They've had this just about every year and they managed to overcome it. I'd almost, if I'm the team, rather have the struggles come early and then you really have to hit the accelerator in December to make the playoffs. And then when you do make the playoffs, you're rolling at that point. You've gotten hot. And, it was the opposite last year. They won their first 5 games. Then they had the losing streak. Then they got back on track. And they pretty much coasted to their division title at the end of the season. And I think that it almost cost them. I mean, we talked about it before. I mean, they were not at full tilt against the Packers and the Lions. And then finally, at the end of the Lions game, they rediscovered themselves. And then to their credit, they brought that into the Super Bowl as well. But they were not the juggernaut that they were at other points of the year in mid-January. So, I mean, this is only week 3. We're still in September. So it's hard to answer these questions, but I do think that being hot at the end, really having to struggle at the end to make the playoffs can be beneficial.
Matt, I want to ask you about a decision or a couple decisions that were made at the end of the game. The Niners are up 7. They're driving, and they elected to go for the 4th down, which a field goal would have put them up 10. They got the 4th down after it was reviewed, and then they were in a similar spot that next series where a series of downs where they also had a 4th down, elected to kick the field goal, go up 10. They probably felt safe, but what did you make of Shanahan's decision to go for the first one and not the second one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they felt that Jake Moody had a pretty good chance of hitting that 55-yarder. We watch him in practice and warm-ups, and he was hitting those. And obviously, he had hit a couple of 55-yarders in the opener against the Jets, so they felt that the odds were good there. I mean, I feel like he hits that, and the game's pretty much iced at that point. He barely missed it. So I don't know. The Jake Moody miss is up there among mistakes and special teams blunders. I don't put it up at the very top though. To me, that punt return was just almost as bad as the fake punt. But that was pretty much the worst thing you could have had at that moment.
And I think just to back that up, Matt, too, Jake Moody going into that kick was 8 of 8. He was 2 of 2 from beyond 50, 2 of 2 from beyond 40. He's made obviously all his extra points. He's made a 53-yarder this year. So I can't fault Kyle Shanahan for wanting to do that. And boom, it's a 2-score game and you're way in the driver's seat at that point.
Yeah, I agree with you. The 2 plays that preceded that, those were the 2. I just reviewed the game and I put a stopwatch on how long Brock Purdy had to throw. One was 12.8 seconds, and the next one was over 15 seconds.
That one was crazy.
And he just was not able to find anybody downfield.
Yeah.
The 49ers were going for it. I mean, they were trying to have big plays there at the end. It's hard to tell what Purdy was seeing or not seeing. The all-22 isn't out yet, but the effort was there. It just didn't happen.
How about on the bright side, Jennings? My goodness. I mean, that was a spectacular performance for him. And I guess, Dave and I were talking about this earlier, Matt, when CMC and Debo and Kittle and Aiyuk really gets going, it just feels like it gives them even more an unstoppable offense if everything's clicking.
Yeah, I mean, this was the Juwan Jennings we were seeing in the Super Bowl, which would have led to him being MVP of that game if the 49ers had won. Everything that went to Juwan Jennings was good yesterday. I mean, it was just that type of day. There was a play in the third quarter where, the Rams defensive back had great coverage, and Jennings literally reached over the guy's head, caught a ball, and scooped it off of his chest. I mean, it was one of those games where if you just threw it in his direction, he was going to come down. It was magic. It was an all-timer, probably never going to happen again. T.O. had, a couple of games like that in his career. Jerry Rice probably had even more. But, I mean, that's just underscoring how rare it is. None of the other, renowned wide receivers who are currently on this team have had quite that type of game. This was a special game. Sadly, Juwan Jennings left the locker room without talking to anybody, which to me was bizarre. We'll have to get to the bottom of that, but that was a bit of a disappointment after such a stellar game.
I'm curious. Maybe I'll ask you next week if he does answer your question about that. I'm just going to take a guess. Maybe he didn't want to be asked about his individual day in light of the devastating loss. I'm going to choose to think it's that, Matt. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been awkward. How do you kind of answer questions about how great you are when your team just had a bad loss?
I did my part. I don't know. Maybe if Ronnie Bell could catch like I could, maybe he says that. I don't know. I doubt it.
Ronnie Bell was also not seen in
that's believable.
11 catches, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns. To your point, Matt Barrows, 49er wide receivers with at least 100 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns in a game. This is over the last 30 years. Terrell Owens in 01, Jerry Rice in 95, Juwan Jennings on Sunday.
Wow.
So it's pretty decent company, and I guess we can leave with this, Matt, and this is, again, more of a fan question than anything else. I had a bowl of cereal this morning, and when I was pouring the milk, I noticed Brandon Aiyuk's face on the side of the carton. When do we are we officially in we need to get worried about Brandon Aiyuk, or is this just something like jury duty we all have to sit through until he's in shape?
When this happened and he finally signed, I looked at the calendar and I said, you know what? That late September game against the Patriots, that's the game that I think Brandon Aiyuk is going to look like Brandon Aiyuk. And he's cutting it awfully close here. That's the next game on the schedule. And you're right. He hasn't looked like himself. More to the point, the chemistry with Purdy hasn't been there. And that's what happens when you're just not there. Guess who was there for training camp? Juwan Jennings was there. Yeah. Guess who Purdy feels real comfortable throwing to? Juwan Jennings. He doesn't have that level with Aiyuk. I think it's coming. And like I said, I thought that maybe a month in would be when you would get it. But I haven't seen this yet, but I think the sideline reporter said something about talking to Trent Williams, and Trent Williams sort of being surprised by how long it's taken him to get up to speed. He thought he could come in and be ready pretty quickly. And everybody thought that it would be easier for an offensive lineman to do that than a wide receiver. So it's what comes with a multi-month holdout, basically. And the 49ers have to deal with it.
That is Matt Barrows of The Athletic. Of course, we'll be putting out a ton of content this week, all the breakdowns and not so fun or fun stuff, if you will. Be educated, subscribe to The Athletic, read the some of the best journalism out there, led by our dear friend Matt. Appreciate you. Hopefully we got a win next time. If we don't have a win next week to talk about, Matt, then I'm getting out of show business. We'll figure it out, and we'll have a nicer conversation with you, if you will, next Monday. But we appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you in a week.
Thank you.
Care. That's Matt Barrows. We'll take a quick 1-minute break. When we come back, speaking of missed opportunities, the Las Vegas Raiders.